Hi, I'm Hope from Embroidery, and today we're going to make one of these little sampler hoops. They're fun. It's a cute way to learn all these different stitches. Now, for this project, you're going to need an embroidery hoop, fabric. You're going to need a thing of embroidery floss, some spare cardboard, a pencil, and scissors. Now you can use cute embroidery scissors. Don't use your fabric scissors to cut up your cardboard. You might want to grab your kitchen sink scissors for that. Now, if you are able to get this finished and you post it on the internet, I would love it if you would tag me at Hope Embroidery so I can see what you made. If you are having any difficulty finding the supplies that you need and you don't want to go to 5 different places to find them, I have supplies on my website, so I'll leave some helpful links below in the description for you if you're having any troubles. Let's get started. Okay, today I'm going to show you how to make this sampler. You'll learn lots of different stitches in it, and hopefully you'll have a fun time doing it. So before we get started, you've got to get your fabric and your hoop. So to do that, you're going to separate your outer from your inner hoop. Take your inner hoop and put it underneath your fabric. Put your outer hoop on top. Now there's no right or wrong way to do this part, but typically I suggest that if you're right-handed, you have the screw on your right side, and if you're left-handed, you have the screw on your left side. That just makes it easier for you to tighten it. So tighten it just a little bit, and then pull all the way around to tighten your fabric. And when you get back to the top, tighten it a little bit more. Sometimes you'll have to do that a couple of times. Every hoop is different, but you want it to sound like a drum. And you want it to sound and feel like a drum. Now the next thing you'll want to do is take some kitchen scissors, because embroidery scissors are usually too small to do this, and cut about 1 inch around. Now, the reason I do that is because if I don't and I start stitching, I know I'm going to end up with this piece stitched to the back of the hoop, and that's incredibly frustrating and hard to fix. So you want to cut it so that it's still long enough to go through the back, about that length, but not so long that it's going to catch your stitches. And that's how you get your fabric in your hoop. Now I need to show you how to thread your needle. So I'm using all 6 strands of cotton embroidery floss in this project, which just means if you look closely at a strand of embroidery floss, it's actually made up of 6 strands, and you can separate those to get more delicate stitches, but we're just going to use all 6 strands. Now, if you haven't done this yet, go ahead and put your floss on bobbins. You can either get plastic bobbins like this, sometimes they're made out of paper, or you can make them out of spare cardboard that you have in your home. So you don't have to measure this exactly, but if you want to, I believe it's 1 inch by 1.5 inches with a little slot at the top, so you can still write the number of your floss, and the slit helps you keep it organized. See? So I'm gonna grab about an arm's length of floss, and to thread my needle, you can use the, let's call it the water method, where you get this part just a little wet so you can smush it all down together and then put it through the eye of your needle. I have different tips and tricks for how to thread your needle posted out there, but usually with the needles that I provide, they're big enough for you to do it without a needle threader, but there are other options for you too out there if you have trouble getting it threaded. The most important thing is to just be patient and you'll get it. So now on the other end of my floss, I'm gonna tie a knot. and snip off the end. There are other ways to do this too. This is just how we're gonna do it for this one. So what you have is about an arm's length of floss with, on this end, you've got a little tail. So as you're stitching, it shouldn't come out because you're holding it like this. But if it does, you just re-thread it. And then on this end, you have a knot. And that way, when you start stitching, it won't come through the fabric. So to show you how to do all of these stitches, I'm actually going to be stitching in my embroidery stand. You don't need a stand, but it helps keep everything in the same shot. So I'm going to be stitching in a 4-inch hoop. This is a 3-inch hoop over here. And that's why I've drawn a circle so that I can show you just the amount of stitches that you'll need to get this done. I do, like I stitched this without a stand. You don't need one. It just helps me keep it all in the same shot. So in the next shot, you'll see this in my embroidery stand and we'll start stitching. Okay, the first thing you're gonna do is to take your pencil and try to find the center of your hoop and draw just a small dot. Then try to get in between that dot and the edge of your hoop and draw a dot there, and the same on the other side. And then I'm gonna do some right here in the middle of those two and out here. And I'm going to start by stitching cross stitches over those dots. So to do that, I'm going to come just to the left and up over this first dot. And I'm going to try to cover the dot with my floss and go down. Now you're going to imagine a line running across the top and a line running across the bottom to try to keep your stitches as even as possible, but it doesn't need to look perfect. I always say the worse it looks, the more authentic it looks when it comes to embroidery. Just going to continue all the way down. See, now there, I think I put that a little too far into this area, so I'm going to pull it up. If you make a mistake, you can just pull out your floss and try again. That's sort of the magic of embroidery, is that it's easy to fix your mistakes. When I first started embroidery, I started with cross stitch, and it was a little bit too meticulous for me. But I thought this would be a nice ode to cross stitching and get you comfortable. So my lines aren't totally even, but it's fine. It's not supposed to look perfect, it's handmade. Now I'm gonna go back over these, imagining that there's a straight line on top and on bottom. And here, to make my X, I'm gonna imagine a line from here to here and here to here to figure out where my needle needs to go. And I'll do the same thing down here, imagining from there to there, from there to there, and cross over it. And that's a cross stitch. with a piece of floss. Let me show you how to end it. You're gonna flip your hoop over. And you can weave your floss in and out of your stitches in the back there, or you can even just tie a knot, like what I'm doing here. Whatever you prefer to do. There's no right or wrong way to do it. You just wanna get it secure so that it doesn't fall apart. Okay, now that you finish your cross stitch, we're gonna move on to back stitch. To start, I'm gonna draw a line as even as I can get it down across the bottom of the cross stitches I just made. And to do a back stitch, we're just gonna come up, and then you're gonna decide how long you want your stitches to be. So you can make a small back stitch, a long back stitch, or somewhere in the middle, which is what I'm gonna do. Then you wanna come up that same distance and then go back down through this hole. That's why it's called back stitch, because you're going back. Back stitch is probably the most essential stitch to learn in embroidery. You can make anything if you can back stitch. Anything you can draw, you can back stitch. There are some very well-known stitchers who only use back stitch. And that's back stitch, super simple. Now, if you can back stitch, you can do whipped back stitch. So to do that, I'm gonna draw a line on top, just like I did for the back stitch, just as a guideline for myself. And to do whipped back stitch, you start by doing a normal back stitch, just like we did a second ago. Now I'm about to run out of floss, so I'm gonna go ahead and tie this off when I'm done with the back stitch part. So if you need to see that again, go ahead and look up. You can see my back is already starting to look pretty messy. Nobody's ever gonna look at the back. Don't worry about what that looks like. Now, that looks the same as our normal back stitch, but to make it look interesting, you can start from either side. I'm gonna start here on the left and come up through this hole that I've made with the back stitch. And then I'm gonna run my needle underneath that stitch without piercing the fabric and pull it. Underneath the fabric, pull, or underneath the stitch, not the fabric, pull. And this is the whipped part of whipped back stitch. This stitch is really good for adding a little dimension to your outline pieces. It's great if you're following a curve. So for example, if you do hand lettering and you want to stitch out lettering, whipped back stitch is a great option. And then to end, I'm gonna go down through this hole. and that's whipped backstitch. Now that you know how to do whipped backstitch, you're ready to take on chain stitch. So I'm going to draw a line. There's actually two ways to do chain stitch, and I'm going to show you reverse chain stitch because I think it's a little bit easier. So to do that, again, you can start on either side. We're going to start by making a very small straight stitch. Very similar motion to what you're doing with cross stitches and back stitches. Now after you've made that first stitch, then you need to decide how big you want these chain stitches to be so you can just stay consistent across the row. I'm going to make mine about this long. And I'm going to come under the stitch just like I did with the whipping motion up here and take my floss through. And then I'm going to come back down through this same hole, and you'll see that it becomes kind of like a little chain. So I'll go up that same distance. And now I'm going to go under both of these stitches. Come back down through that same hole. And it'll make a nice little chain stitch. You can use chain stitch for outlining as well. Oops, I got a knot. If you get a knot, try not to get too frustrated. You can try to get it out, or you can cut it and start over. But chain stitching is good for outlining. You can actually use it to fill a space if you put a bunch of chain stitches next to each other. It's also just kind of fun. And that's, oh, to end, I'm just going down and ending it like that. That's chain stitch. Now that you know chain stitch, you can learn detached chain stitch. So to learn that, I'm going to draw a line going straight down like that, and then two coming out this way. So in regular chain stitch, it's all connected. In detached chain stitch, you're making one of these on its own. So to do that, I'm going to come up through the top part of that line I drew, and then back down in that same hole, or as close to it as you can get it, leaving a loop. You want to leave a loop right there. Now I'm going to take my needle through the bottom part of that line I made and take it through the loop and pull. Now you can pull very tightly and have a nice tight detached chain stitch, or you can pull kind of lightly. And then to secure it, I'm going to make a little stitch just above the loop I made and pull, and that's what it looks like. So let's do that again. And one more time over here. These are really good for adding flourishes, or you can connect them together in a circle and make a little daisy. And that's how you do detached chain stitch. Okay, now that you kind of understand the idea of pulling things and attaching them, you can do something called fly stitch, which is super fun. So to do fly stitch, I'm going to draw a line not here, but just a little bit above it. As a guideline. And again, you can start on either side that you want. I'm going to start over here, and we're going to start with just a basic straight stitch. This is where you're going to decide how big these stitches are going to be. So I'm going to make mine kind of big here and go down. Now we're going to imagine a line going this way up here and a line going down here, kind of like we did with our cross stitches. I'm going to go to the edge of my hoop and come up and then hold this with my thumb, and I'm going to go that same space down, leaving a loop. Come up through this hole here, move the loop to the right, and pull the floss like that. Now to secure that, you're going to go back down that same distance, and now it's secure, and we're going to add a whole line of those. So I'm going to use this spot right here and go up to meet with there, kind of like we did with the cross stitch. Hold your floss, do the same thing down here, come up through this hole so that your needle goes through your loop and pull all the way down. Now this one is a lot of fun, but it does require some muscle memory like any stitch. So if it's kind of hard for you to get at first, just keep practicing until you get it. You'll eventually be able to do it like it's nothing. Look like little chicken feet. But you can also use this to make vines. Sometimes I use this technique to stitch letters, like they kind of look like a Y. And get creative and just play around with it. Now to end it, I'm going to make this last stitch here. Then I'm going to do it just like I did before. And come up. But instead of stitching a long thing to secure it, I'm going to secure it more like I did the detached chain stitches, just above where that loop's going to go and pull. And that's how you do fly stitch. Alright, you've just learned how to do so many different stitches, and I believe in you that you can do a French knot. So grab your floss, and we're going to start by coming up. Actually, you can draw some guidelines here for that too. I'm just going to draw 3 little dots at the top here. Now to do a French knot, you're going to come up through your floss, or through your fabric. I always mix up those words. And you're going to wrap once, twice, 3 times for this first one. Now here's the important part. You're not going to go through that same hole you just made, because then you could pull your knot all the way through the fabric and then you'll have to start again. You're going to do it either just to the side of that hole or just above the hole, just next to the hole. And you also need to make sure you're holding it, your floss, with your thumb here. As you're pulling down, keep holding it with your thumb until you can't hold it any longer. Then you'll let it go and you'll have a nice French knot. So let's do that again. These on the side, I'm going to do just 2 wraps so that it'll be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to wrap once, twice, and then down, holding it with my thumb until I can't any longer, pulling. One more time. Now this is going to take practice. It's a difficult stitch for a lot of folks to get, but that's fine. I have a ton of French knot tutorials on my Instagram page. If you're having an issue doing it right now and you need to see it a little bit more, you could go there. And I'm going to tie this off and get ready to finish my hoop. And you can see the back of my hoop is a total mess at this point, but again, nobody's ever going to see that, so don't worry about it. Now this last stitch should be a total breeze for you. And this is where you get to play around. We're gonna add running stitch to some of these gaps to make it look a little bit more even. To do running stitch, it's kind of like doing back stitch with fewer steps. So for example, I've got a pretty big gap in between these two stitches, so I'm gonna put a line of running stitch across the middle. And to do that, you'll come up, choose the distance that you want your stitches to be. I want mine to be kind of small, so I'm gonna go down like this. Then I'll go up that same distance, and instead of going back like we did in back stitch, I'm just gonna run forward like that. So that looks cute, and I think I'll also add a row here and here, and I'll do that off camera, and when I come back I'll show you how to finish your hoop. So here are a couple of hoops that I made using that same process, and you can see they all look a little bit different. I added some straight stitches here to the bottom of the one I just made with you. On this one there are a lot more running stitches. On this one I added, you know, my X's were, my cross stitches were a little big, so I thought I'd add little tiny cross stitches in between them. So everybody's project is gonna look a little bit different, so you can have fun with it. Now, how do you finish your hoop? So there are a lot of different ways to back your hoop, but the way I do it is by cutting out, using the back inner hoop as a template. I cut out a circle out of spare cardboard, and then I simply put my hoop face down and gather material like that, and then I take my cardboard and I smush it over so that all the fabric is inside like that. And I try to smush it down, but you can see that this is a little too big, so I'm going to take my kitchen scissors and just trim it off a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to trim it a little bit and see if that's enough. Don't use your fabric scissors for this, or your embroidery scissors, you'll ruin them. Okay, let's see if this one fits. Use your kitchen scissors. Okay. That fits a little bit better. So I'm not going to smash it all the way down. I'm just going to do it so that it's kind of tucked in there. And then it will lay flat and sunlight won't come through. The reason I do it that way instead of using glue or sewing is because if it gets not tight, like if it falls down or if my cat steps on it, which happens a lot, I can then take it out, stretch it, retighten it, and then put the back on, and it's as good as new. That's why I don't like using glue, okay? Please don't use glue. And that's it. So if you have any questions, let me know. And I hope you got something out of this today. Thanks.